Hello and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. Thank you for joining me out here on my porch and understanding that I'm here by myself, so I still have to walk around the camera. Today we are going to continue in our story, A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. Today I think we're going to have to separate the chapter. My battery handles about 14 pages and this one is 16 and I don't want to push it, so we will split chapter 4. And last chapter, Ove met his neighbor's children. They offered him some dinner. All right, chapter 4. A man called Ove does not pay a 3 kroner surcharge. Ove gives her the plants. 2 of them. Of course, there weren't supposed to be 2 of them, but somewhere along the line there has to be a limit. It was a question of principle, Ove explains to her. That's why he got 2 flowers in the end. Things don't work when you're not at home, he mutters, and kicks a bit at the frozen ground. His wife doesn't answer. There'll be snow tonight, says Ove. They said on the news there wouldn't be snow, but as Ove often points out, whatever they predict is bound not to happen. He tells her this. She doesn't answer. He puts his hands in his pockets and gives her a brief nod. It's not natural rattling around the house on my own all day when you're not here. It's no way to live. That's all I have to say. She doesn't reply to that either. He nods and kicks the ground again. He can't understand people who long to retire. How can anyone spend their whole life longing for the day when they become superfluous, wandering about, a burden on society? What sort of man would ever wish for that? Staying at home, waiting to die, or even worse, waiting for them to come and fetch you and put you in a home. Being dependent on other people to get to the toilet. Ove can't think of anything much worse. His wife often teases him, says he's the only man she knows who'd rather be laid out in a coffin than travel in a mobility service van. And she may have a point there. Ove had risen at 5:45, made coffee for his wife and himself, went around checking the radiators to make sure she hadn't sneakily turned them up. They were all unchanged from yesterday, but he turned them down a little more just to be on the safe side. Then he took his jacket from the hook in the hall, the only hook of all 6 that wasn't burdened with her clothes, and set off for his inspection. It had started getting cold, he noticed. Almost time to change his navy autumn jacket for his navy winter jacket. He always knows when it's about to snow because his wife starts nagging about turning up the heat in the bedroom. Lunacy, Ove reaffirms every year. Why should the power company directors feather their nests just because of seasonality? Turning up the heat 5 degrees costs thousands of kroner per year. He knows because he's calculated it himself. He knows because every winter he drags down an old diesel generator from the attic that he swapped at a rummage sale for a gramophone. He's connected this to a fan heater he bought at a sale for 39 kroner. Once the generator has charged up the fan heater, it runs for 30 minutes on the little battery Ove has hooked it up to, and his wife keeps it on her side of the bed. She can run it a couple of times before they go to bed, but only a couple. No need to be lavish about it. Diesel isn't free, you know. And Ove's wife does what she always does, nods and agrees that Ove is probably right. Then she goes around all winter, sneakily turning up the radiators. Every year, the same bloody thing. Ove kicks the ground again. He's considering telling her about the cat. If you can even call that mangy, half-bald creature a cat. It was sitting there again today when he came back from his inspection, practically right outside their front door. He pointed at it and shouted so loudly that his voice echoed between the houses. The cat just sat there looking at Ove. Then it stood up elaborately, as if making a point of demonstrating that it wasn't leaving because of Ove, but rather because there were better things to do, and disappeared around the corner. Ove decides not to mention the cat to her. He assumes she'll only be disgruntled with him for driving it away. If she was in charge, the whole house would be full of tramps, whether of the furried kind or not. He's wearing his navy suit and has done up the top button of the white shirt. She tells him to leave the top button undone if he's not wearing a tie. He protests that he's not some urchin who's renting out deck chairs before defiantly buttoning it up. He's got his dented old wristwatch on, the one that his dad inherited from his father when he was 19, the one that was passed on to Ove after his 16th birthday, a few days after his father died. Ove's wife likes that suit. She always says he looks so handsome in it. Like any sensible person, Ove is obviously of the opinion that only posers wear their best suits on weekdays. But this morning he decided to make an exception. He even put on his black going out shoes and polished them with a responsible amount of boot shine. As he took his autumn jacket from the hook in the hall before he went, he threw a thoughtful eye on his wife's collection of coats. He wondered how such a small human being could have so many winter coats. You almost expect if you stepped through this lot you'd find yourself in Narnia, a friend of Ove's wife had once joked. Ove didn't have a clue what she was talking about, but he did agree there were a hell of a lot of coats. He walked out of the house before anyone on the street had even woken up, strolled up to the parking area, opened his garage with a key. He had a remote control for the door, but had never understood the point of it. An honest person could just as well open the door manually. He unlocked the Saab, also with a key. The system had always worked perfectly well. There was no reason to change it. He sat in the driver's seat and twisted the tuning dial half forward, then half back before adjusting each of the mirrors, as he did every time he got into the Saab. As if someone routinely broke into the Saab, and mischievously changed Ove's mirrors and radio channels. As he drove across the parking area, he passed that pregnant foreign woman from next door. She was holding her 3-year-old by the hand. The big, blonde, lanky one was walking beside her. All 3 of them caught sight of Ove and waved cheerfully. Ove didn't wave back. At first, he was going to stop and give her a dressing down about letting children run about in the parking area as if it were some municipal playground. But he decided he didn't have the time. He drove along, passing row after row of houses identical to his own. When they'd first moved in here, there were only 6 houses. Now there were hundreds of them. There used to be a forest here, but now there were only houses. Everything paid for with loans, of course. That was how you did it nowadays. Shopping on credit and driving electric cars and hiring tradesmen to change a light bulb. Laying click-on floors and fitting electric fireplaces and carrying on. A society that apparently could not see the difference between the correct anchor bolt for a concrete wall and a smack in the face. Clearly, this was how it was meant to be. It took him exactly 14 minutes to drive to the florist's in the shopping center. Ove kept exactly to every speed limit, even on that 35-mile-per-hour road where the recently arrived idiots in suits came tanking along at 55. Among their own houses, they put up speed bumps and damnable numbers of signs about children playing. But when driving past other people's houses, it was apparently less important. Ove had repeated this to his wife every time they drove past over the last 10 years. And it's getting worse and worse, he liked to add, just in case, by some miracle, she hadn't heard him the first time. Today, he'd barely gone about a mile before a black Mercedes positioned itself in a 4-arm's length behind his Saab. Ove signaled with his brake lights 3 times. The Mercedes flashed its high beams at him in an agitated manner. Ove snorted at his rear view mirror, as if it was his duty to fling himself out of the way as soon as these morons decided speed restrictions didn't apply to them. Honestly, Ove didn't move. The Mercedes gave him a burst of its high beams again. Ove slowed down. The Mercedes sounded its horn. Ove lowered his speed to 15 miles an hour. When they reached the top of a hill, the Mercedes overtook him with a roar. The driver, a man in his 40s, in a tie, and with white cables trailing from his ears, held up his finger through the window at Ove. Ove responded to the gesture in the manner of all men of a certain age who've been properly raised, by slowly tapping the tip of his finger against the side of his head. The man in the Mercedes shouted until his saliva spattered against the inside of his windshield. Then he put his foot down and disappeared. 2 minutes later, Ove came to a red light. The Mercedes was at the back of the line. Ove flashed his lights at it. He saw the driver craning his neck around. The white earpieces dropped out and fell against the dashboard. Ove nodded with satisfaction. The light turned green. The line didn't move. Ove sounded his horn. Nothing happened. Ove shook his head. Must be a woman driver. Or road work. Or an Audi. When 30 seconds had passed without anything happening, Ove put the car in neutral, opened the door, and stepped out of the Saab with the engine still running, stood in the road, and peered ahead with his hands on his hips, filled with a kind of Herculean irritation, the way Superman might have stood if he got stuck in a traffic jam. The man in the Mercedes gave a blast on his horn. Idiot, thought Ove. In the same moment, the traffic started moving. The cars in front of Ove moved off. The car behind him, a Volkswagen, beeped at him. The driver waved impatiently at Ove. Ove glared back. He got back into the Saab and leisurely closed the door. Amazing what a rush we're in. He scoffed into the rear view mirror and drove on. At the next red light, he ended up behind the Mercedes again. Another line. Ove checked his watch and took a left turn down a smaller, quiet road. This entailed a longer route to the shopping center, but there were fewer traffic lights. Not that Ove was mean, but as anyone who knows anything knows, cars use less fuel if they keep moving rather than stopping all the time. And, as Ove's wife often says, if there's one thing you could write in Ove's obituary, it's at least he was economical with gas. All right, I think we're going to stop there. This is the first part of chapter 4. And I'll pick it up right there at the very next video after my batteries charge. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining me for Mrs. Pam Reads. And remember to subscribe to the channel and then click that little bell so that you'll get a notice when a new video posts. You guys have a great day. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.